welcome to Frame by
What's up,
Frame
Barry?
podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Of
Of course.
I'm Sophia,
I'm Thomas.
and we just would love to learn more about you. So if you could just start by telling us a little bit about yourself to our listeners.
Yes, of course. So my name is Perry Drugan. I'm a senior, double majoring in management and speech language pathology. And my whole life I've been very heavily involved in the arts. It's kind of been the backbone of all my career pursuits, especially even in speech pathology, which has kind of taken a new form. And I've been doing it since I was 6 years old. So.
How'd you get interested in it? Do you remember even your first show or anything?
Yes, the first show I was in, I was a rat.
Oh.
Yeah, it was really cool. I was cast as a rat, and then my second show I was a skunk, and my mom was like,
Damn, we're only animals.
Big
Only
animals,
Yeah. What was after that?
Then after that, I did Wizard of Oz, and I was a munchkin, and my mom was like, there we go.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah,
Alright, we're getting better now. Rat, skunk.
Yeah, rat, skunk, directly pipeline to munchkin.
That's fine.
Yeah, and then, so I've been doing it since I was 6 years old,
Mhm.
and then I immediately jumped into, there was a day, it's such a cringy story, but I was literally, making my bed with my mom when I was 10, because when you're 6, are you really a good singer when you're 6? People just hear you sing and
Yeah.
they're like, oh, that's
Oh,
cute.
Yeah, you got the fake mic. Everyone
And
gives
you're
you.
smiling, exactly. But then when I was 10, I was singing a song and just making my bed, and my mom came in my room she's like, we're signing you up for voice lessons. You have a gift, and I can't sing, but you can. We're gonna use that. And I was like,
They were right though.
yeah. Oh my
Low
gosh.
key.
That was
Yeah.
very such a good
That was an
start.
investment.
Thanks. Oh my gosh, thanks.
So when did you realize that acting wasn't something then that you wanted to pursue seriously?
So my whole life thought that acting was definitely something I wanted to pursue seriously. It actually, when I was a junior and senior in high school, I was tussling with the idea of applying to musical theater programs because I've been very heavily involved. Musical theater has been my thing. I've done some straight plays and short film stuff, but I love musical theater because I think I'm singer first. That's I think. So it wasn't until my senior year of high school where I became very, very family oriented. I knew what I had a very strong passion for the arts, but I knew the kind of life that I wanted to live, and I knew that it would be very difficult to kind of balance both of those 100% and guarantee that family-centered life that I really, really am is the base bone of what I want to do. And also I started to realize junior year when I started, it's the whole pre-screen process. I'm sure your brother had to do all of it for Tisch. Yeah, or not Tisch, Northwestern. But it was very demanding, and it was something that made everything that I loved about musical theater being my outlet just completely spin on its axis. I did not look forward to going to lessons. I didn't look forward because I had training coaches, and I was in a training program for it and script reading, and I just I just didn't look forward to it. It got to the point where my parents would drive me to these lessons for filming my pre-screens, and I had no desire to do so. So then when I came to Penn State, I really didn't know what I wanted my major to be because I couldn't see myself doing anything else. So recently, actually, I think it was my sophomore year, is when I found speech language pathology, and I found that there was a voice-centered specialty in speech language pathology that works towards vocal rehab for singers that have undergone vocal strain.
That's it.
Yeah, and I've recently taken quite a fascination to private practices that do that. But speech pathology is very broad, but that's definitely a specialty that has kept me in the major.
Okay, because then at that point you'll be able to relate to any of your
Exactly.
clients and
Exactly.
be I understand how difficult it must be to not be able to sing, have a voice right now. I really want to help you.
Exactly. And even in my classes, we've taken some voice-centered rehab classes, and it's been a lot of talk about things that can harm your voice and how to rehabilitate your voice and what not to drink before you sing and what not to.
I remember before shades and stuff. She'll drink honey and all
Really?
this stuff to prepare her voice.
See, that's the thing. Those are the things that people don't see and understand.
Yeah.
What goes on behind the scenes before you actually get on stage.
1,000%. I even the thing that made me realize that was a specialty I'd be interested in looking into is actually TikTok. Junior year I learned about and Wicked movie promo. I saw all the alphabas that play Alphaba on Broadway. It's one of the most demanding roles. They all are required to see either a speech language pathologist, or maybe not required, but they all frequently visit a speech language pathologist or ear, nose, and throat doctor and talk about their vocal rehab and maintenance techniques, because in order to sustain that, it's really, really difficult, and they have a very strict regimen of like vocal steaming and different there's just so many different ways to keep your voice in shape, and that's been because I also am very passionate about musical theater, something that I think I have a good background of too.
And you got to think, like, when you're singing, like, if you're one of the main singers of a play, like, you have a show after a show after a show, like, the strain on that alone, like, in the same time period, is like, it adds up. So.
And your vocal cords are, like, dime-sized.
Yeah.
So the fact that you have these two super tiny little thin forms of vibration that produce all of this sound, especially if you're belting versus singing versus screaming, it's just so much upkeep to make sure, because one node, one rip, one nodule, one anything like that can take a very long time to recover from. So yeah, it's been
even just me talking on the weekends, I lose my voice in 2 seconds.
Oh, I know. That's why I don't understand, like, to sing for a while, that would be.
And did you know, I didn't know this until you told me, like, I was drinking a coffee before one of our concerts, like, you shouldn't have dairy before you sing.
I do know those things. I mean, have you ever done anything like that? Like, any very specific, like, trick or method?
Yeah, so I'm there's so many things that have been debunked or not debunked, I guess, the opposite.
Yeah.
But I know of like different. Okay, there are different sections of your voice that require different things, and everyone's voice is different. So, for example, I'm very belt heavy. I feel very comfortable in my belting range. That's all kind of placed in the lower part of projection. It's what I'm practically using to talk right now. It's what's projecting my voice. So whenever I am playing a role or singing a song that's very belt oriented, dairy doesn't tend to bother me. But when I'm in that kind of state, I've noticed that my voice kind of doesn't take well to caffeine, because that dries me out a bit. So I try to avoid that and lean into things like throat coat and honey and things of that nature. But when I'm in my head voice, actually, and again, this is just my voice, I don't know if everyone else applies, but when I'm in my head voice, it requires a lot more support, but it's also placed in an upper register, and that register is when, sorry, this is kind of gross, but the dairy causes a lot of mucus, whereas caffeine tends to dry you out. So I try to avoid dairy if I know I'm going to be singing in that kind of mixed range, and that's kind of harder for me to support, but caffeine doesn't typically tend to bother me as much. So it's kind of like flipping back and forth. There are so many other techniques, like my vocal coach when I was 10 taught me to, like, on your way to auditions, do you know, like, warming up your voice?
I've seen some of the warming up
your
stuff.
vocal cords get cold, and it's real, like, you trying to warm up your voice, so like wearing a scarf on your way to auditions or
That's
an important
crazy.
so things of that nature are just, I try to plan.
I was gonna say, like, for when you did Alice by Hearts, like, were you thinking in your head, like, subconsciously, like, let's say the day of, like, what you're eating and drinking for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
This show was the one that I was 1000% the most planning the most in regards to what I was putting into my body, especially because it was at that time during tech, actually, was when I started to realize there was a lot of yelling in Alice by Heart.
Really?
A lot of and that's, I'm not the healthiest yeller. I like to consider myself as a healthy singer, belter, head voice user, but when it comes to yelling, usually when you're yelling in a show, it's coming from a place of very deep emotion, and you're not really thinking about that, because it kind of pulls you out of it. But I realized, like, I think it was like 2 days before opening night, and it could have also been the nerves, but I thought that my voice was starting to go, and I really started, and it wasn't like I woke up and it was gone, but Sophia, you're probably used to it, but you know your voice very, very well after a certain point, and like you're able to sense, like, oh, is something coming on, and so I was very, very careful about what I bought. A vocal steamer. I was buying like the best cough drops on the market that I could find, and like had an Advil schedule for reducing inflammation, even though you're technically not really supposed to do that. But,
oh my god.
Yeah, and it all ended up being
Advil
completely fine.
crazy.
Yeah.
So like, can you tell us more about your role then in Alice by Heart, and like what led you to that role, and like what did you like about it?
Oh my gosh, yes, this is my favorite. That's why I was so grateful that you guys invited me to talk about this, because today is the 19th.
I think so. Yes.
So today was a month ago from closing night.
Oh wow.
So
that was a month ago.
It was a month ago. I know. It flew by.
Oh my god.
But I missed it so much, because you do something for so long, especially that show was like every single day for hours a day, and then all of a sudden it kind of, you say goodbye to the characters and you say goodbye to the people you've been working with throughout the whole process. So getting to do this, I was so excited to bring it back. But yeah, so I'm involved in the Penn State Thespian Society here. It's a really, really, really awesome organization. I love it particularly because it's everyone that kind of had the same, I mean, I shouldn't speak for everyone, but I feel it's a lot of people that have the same idea as me, in the sense that they care so much about keeping musical theater in their lives, and they want to put their everything into it as an outlet, but it's not particularly maybe what they want to like do direct. Like they want to have it in their life somehow, but it's not their major, for example. Like we don't really have musical theater majors in the Thespian Society because they're their own separate entity. So it's really a club that I just describe it as a club that loves musical theater to the core. It's so different from high school theater or other clubs where it's kind of, you don't put your all into it. Yeah. Everyone that's there loves to be there. So that's why I'm very passionate about the club. But one thing that they do are the main stages. There's two. There's one in the fall and there's one in the spring every single year. And this year it was Alice by Heart in the fall, then Legally Blonde is happening in the spring. And I auditioned I've been doing it since freshman year. Thespian Society was one of the first clubs I joined. And I saw they were doing Alice by Heart, and I auditioned.
Had you heard of it before?
So I actually hadn't. The only thing I had heard about it from was one of my close friends, Gabby, who was in the Thespian Society, was raving about the shows. It was never on Broadway, actually. It was off, and it wasn't, actually, I'm 90% sure about that, but she was very, very passionate about it, and she's actually the one that proposed it for the club to do, and she was telling me all about it, and I was really, really, really interested in what she was talking about. I actually played Alice in Alice in Wonderland Junior when I was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah,
so it's meant to be.
Yeah, so I kind of had a knowledge of, but it was so different, like, once I started the process from what I thought it was before, and so I really didn't know a ton about it other than kind of the readings, but I will say, like, what I read about it prior to the auditions was completely different than what I stand by this, but the director that I worked on that show with, Ryder Quiggle, was absolutely one of the best directors I've ever worked with. He took the whole story that I had in my head was just not his vision, and it's not in a way that he was like, this is my vision, not yours. It was like, oh yeah, I see what you're doing there, but this is how I see it. And I was like, you're so right. That's so much bigger and broader and more beautiful than anything I could have thought of. So after auditions was when all that catapulted, and I really got to lean into that story and kind of converge my vision into it as well. And it was one of the most beautiful processes of a show that I've ever been a part of. So that's my background of the show itself.
All right, so you were saying earlier that, you've been doing this for forever. You've been in plays. You just said that, Alice by Heart was your best director. But I was going to ask you, was it so dramatically different from high school to your club now? The competitiveness and the auditions or the preparation time, was it, a lot different? Or was it oh, I've already done this before?
That's a really good question. I was very, very, very blessed with the experience I got in high school. I know a lot of people didn't have great drama department experiences in high school. I had one of probably the best, I'll be that bold. I was lucky enough to have great department directors in high school and middle school and all that stuff. And also I did outside theater I'm from Massachusetts, so you're not gonna know, but I did Hanover Theater and Stadium Theater in Rhode Island, which were for a very wide range of ages, and everyone that I worked with was so phenomenal. I feel like I got completely fulfilled with theater in high school, especially because of those outside ones. Like, I loved my high school department, but obviously high school theater, it's going to be people that just want an extracurricular or, you know, it just kind of half-assing it. So it was very, but also, like, you're doing it with your high school friends that are in your classes and they just want to do it for fun, so that was a whole separate thing. The other ones were a bit more demanding, so it was a bit more, you know, you're not in class with those people and you go there to work and also have fun. But I worked with such phenomenal people in my high school, and I think that's why I was so nervous about coming to college and trying to find a club. Honestly, I debated if I would even be able to find a club, because I didn't want that to be my, I didn't want to cap my, everything I did in high school. Like, I didn't want to have a poor theater experience in college if I had come from such an amazing group of mentors in high school. Especially if it's student run. To me, that was so scary, because I was like, me just thinking about students from high school running, I was like, people probably don't, care that much. And I did the first ever show with the Thespian Society, and it was absolutely amazing. I will say there were things in high school that I did differently than I do in college, and vice versa. In high school, there's a lot more, because it was so different, like school versus the extracurricular. I'd say it's a really, really nice blend, the Thespian Society, of put in the work inside and outside of rehearsal, but also you're having an absolute blast because you're with your closest friends and you're just doing what you all love. And I think that's what's so special about Thespian Society, is that, like, everyone absolutely wholeheartedly loves what they're doing, and they don't want to spend. There's something so pure about being in a group of people that wants to be there as much as you do and wants to contribute to the same craft and art as you do, and that's kind of the feeling that you're ensured in the Thespian Society, and it combines all of that fun and work ethic that I experienced in high school into one club, which was, I think, is one of the biggest blessings I've had in college, for sure.
I could definitely see how that's a lot different from high school. Like you were saying, like, unfortunately, a lot of people in high school do it half-assing as a joke or whatever, and there's always a handful that are either, like, really talented or just, like, that is their passion, that's what they love to do. But having all those people, like, in the same room, I definitely can see how that's, like, a lot, just a lot different.
And talking about the that's the tough thing I always say about theater. It's so hard because I love it so much, but it can get really stressful, like during the audition time.
I was gonna say, is it like super competitive in Thespian Society?
Yeah.
So
I mean, we're at a competitive school, so I gotta think that.
How many people audition for
this?
I don't know the exact number, but I would say over 100 audition.
Yeah.
And like Alice by Heart was a cast of 13, 14.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So, but I will say, the difference is high school, it was competitive, and it was like, it wasn't as fun. Like, it was just like, you go in and everyone is competitive and like talking about how it went. It was so like classic Glee. You guys know, yeah. High school was totally like Glee, where you're like, oh yeah, well, I sang this song and like almost moved her to tears. I didn't say that, but like literally people would say it. And it was just kind of like, oh, and then you get the role and you're like, okay, now I can have fun. Like, you just want to get the auditions out of the way.
I got the call back.
Oh, and then college is it's this Thespian Society is, you'd think it would be the same, if not worse, but it is so much different. It is such a positive environment. You walk in and people are obviously nervous because it's vulnerable to like sing and play a character in front of a group of directors that have been analyzing the script all summer or all break. But everyone there just wants you to do your absolute best. And the audition room, like, I don't feel ever like it's cutthroat, and I don't even feel that way towards other people. I didn't ever think that could be a way an audition can run. It's still nerve-wracking, and obviously there are times where you're like, I really, really, really want a chance to read for this part or to sing for this part or show them what I can do with this line or things of that nature. But with the Thespian Society, it's just, I don't know how I got so lucky to find a club where the people want you to succeed just as much as you want to succeed, and vice versa. So it really went against what my prediction was.
And how did you connect with your own character, Alice?
Oh my gosh. So Alice it wasn't the easiest character to connect with, but it 1000% was. It was like I could completely understand where she was coming from. And that's I've never had that.
Yeah, I guess you can't, like,
yeah.
with a rat or
right.
a skunk.
No,
Like, I don't know.
exactly.
I don't know where it's coming from. This is Ratatouille or something. I don't know.
No, exactly. But, like, even in high school, I always played, like, the comedic characters because that was just always, like, you just, like, I wanted to do that. Like, I just wanted to make people laugh.
I feel like it feels more natural, too.
Right.
Like, it's not...
1,000%.
Yeah.
And you're just, like, oh, this character's loud. This character talks fast. This character's hyper. This character, like, that comedic timing is just a lot of fun to play with. And so that's kind of been where I lean. And that's where a lot of my roles were in high school. And even, like, in undergrad with Penn State, Alice, other than I was, like, Belle and Beauty and the Beast in high school, but even that, like, you can't really relate to being in love with the monster in a castle. Like, that's not exactly what. And the story of Alice by Heart is so interesting because I never would have anticipated that I would connect with it as much as I did, because the whole story is basically Alice in Wonderland is just confusing. There's so many different ways to interpret it. And Alice by Heart takes a whole spin on it and puts it in a child's perspective where they're in, like, the heart of World War II. They're in a bunker, and she's losing her best friend in the whole wide world to tuberculosis, which is, like, so, like, whoa, like, how on earth can you, like,
not know
yeah.
that?
I would not expect
I
that
probably should
timeline.
have described it. No, yeah, it's, so, that's, like, the whole, so what happens, basically, is their only form of getting out of the bunker, because they're all hiding, is to read Alice in Wonderland, and they've been reading it since they were kids. So she's reading him this story, and he's sick. His name's Alfred, and he's sick, and there are all these other kids in the bunker that eventually take the form of the Wonderland characters. But the nurse, who is in charge of keeping Alfred isolated from all the other children to keep them safe, finds Alice constantly sneaking in there to read to him because he's her best friend and she wants him to get better. And even though he has a bad prognosis and is presumed to die soon, so she rips up the book in front of Alice. And that's when Alice kind of takes this stance of, I'm going to tell the story how I know it from heart. Alice by Heart.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So then the whole story is, like, all the Wonderland characters, which in Alice in Wonderland are very confusing. Well, not confusing, but just out there.
Definitely for a kid's story, I feel like it's very
yes.
trippy.
Yes,
compared to other
trippy. It's a
things.
good way to put it. And it's all the characters are taking, like, are from Alice's perspective. So, like, the evil Queen of Hearts is the Red Cross nurse that is separating her from Alfred in the real world. But she's not actually a bad woman. She's just trying to keep her safe. But Alice is a kid, and Alice depicts her as the enemy. And, you know, there's so many different parts of the show that are consistent with Alice aging. There's, like, the Duchess, who plays, like, a whimsical, you know, growth. There's even, like, an exploration of almost, like, sexual identity and growing up in, like, the caterpillars, which is so wild. And the doctor that diagnoses Alfred is the Jabberwock, who's this evil monster. And so the whole show is very, there's just layer on layer on layer. But the key points is that it's told from Alice's perspective. And just kind of, I know I'm yapping, but so a show that out there I didn't anticipate to be able to connect with the most over any show I've ever been a part of. But finding that Alice is so unable to comprehend that time with her best friend that she cares about so much and experiences are going to be over, so much so that she builds a whole world where that isn't even a concept, and that time will never pass, and how she'll never have to finish the book because they're just going to stay in the book forever. And that whole concept of just, like, clinging on to something has been so true for me growing up. I've always felt like I'm struggling to let go of things. So I can't imagine being so young and in such a difficult scenario, and the way that she handles things could be perceived as, oh, she's being selfish here, she's being childish here. But to love someone so much that you're willing to do anything to not let go of the time you have with them, I feel like is a theme that so many people that have important people in their lives that they care about can relate to. And I think that's what made it so, I was so thankful to be able to play a character like that.
Were there any challenges that came with that? Would you say, like, even trying to, like, portray that to the audience was challenging for you?
1,000%. I think the thing I really wanted to hit home was that it's hard to like describe. There's so much going on, but I really wanted to not have the audience leaving saying Alice is selfish, Alfred, her love interest, is like, I didn't want them to pick sides, and that was also something that our director worked on us with. And I also didn't want them to watch the show and say, oh, that was a love story between a little girl and a boy who passed away, because there are so many other characters that are showing Alice's, like, the story in my eyes was Alice not wanting to let go of time that she has had in the past, and wanting to live in that world forever, and coming to terms with the fact that she's growing up. This is a story of growing up in hardship and the beauty and difficulties of grief and loss. And that was difficult, because there were so many lines where you could be like, Alice is kind of not good. Alice is selfish. She's forcing this sick boy to stay in her world.
But it's realistic, though. Like, I mean, like, at least it's like a real world take on, like, you know, everyone has like problems of, you know, letting go of the past or whatever.
Right, exactly.
So at least that's, you know, better than just the normal, you know, Alice in Wonderland take of more trippy. At least this is more like, okay, adults can relate to this, and still kids too.
Exactly. The whole coming of age too side of things. And
And so if the show is October 19th and we start school like August 20 something, you said you worked like every single day to do this. Like, how do you like balance your energy and focus like when you're doing that? It must be a lot.
Oh my gosh, it was just so much fun, because it was also the cast that I worked with was just so the cast and the crew and directing staff, everyone was so amazing. So genuinely, it was what I looked forward to every single day. There were a lot of lines to be memorized by everyone in the cast. Almost everyone is on stage all the time in that show. I never left the stage, and there's no intermission, so you're on stage for an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, but so originally I was like, how am I gonna learn all these lines? Like, I don't know if I'll be able to do it. But it genuinely, I was so passionate about working with the cast I was working with the lines I was given and the character I was given, and learning more about her and how she can be brought to life and depicted in a way that was fitting. It was literally, I remember doing this as a reward. Like, okay, if I finish this essay, I get to study my like lines for pages 1 to 10. That's how much I loved it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's easier to study for something if you're actually like looking forward to it.
Exactly, and it was so
It's not like doing math homework.
Yes, and I could pick up the phone and text the director and be like, "What is she saying here? What does this mean?" And he would give an amazing depiction. Or I could text a friend that's in the show and say, "What do you think in this scene she means?" And that was just so cool to see, because even like the show we put on could be totally different from someone else who read that script and put on a show, but just like peeling back the layers of where we were going, and just knowing that we have that whole structure of the show behind us, even if it doesn't read clear to the audience, knowing that it's there, it was just so cool to build and watch flourish as we worked on the show process longer.
So, like, how many hours a day do you do it for then? Because, like, you're balancing that with school and your commitments. So where I would maybe do an hour of homework and do 10 minutes of Netflix, you're like, I'm going to do an hour of homework and then I'm going to study my lines.
Yeah, read 100 pages of script.
Yeah, I loved it so much that probably, like, with rehearsals, and honestly, a bulk of it was also just working on it outside rehearsals, I would aim to do, like, 5 hours a day.
What about sleep?
I love my 8 hours of sleep.
You got 8 hours of sleep?
Sometimes. No, not usually. Usually not. Well, I love staying busy. I don't like not doing anything at all times. It's just like I love going. So I really don't take breaks like especially when I'm doing something I'm so passionate about, and I'm so passionate about my major, and I'm so passionate about this show, and so passionate about, you know, the people in my life and spending time with them. Like, it was never a burden. It was never a hindrance. And to me, it was like the days where I would wake up like tired because I didn't get 8 hours of sleep because I had a late rehearsal or I was up studying, and I got to go get a coffee and do more of it because I knew I got the opportunity to work that hard. I was like, those were my favorite moments where I knew that like I was a part of something that was so special to me, and I had that opportunity to be a part of something so special to me, and almost fulfilling, like, to see myself, like, I would just remind myself that, like, younger me would be so, like,
to see how far you've come.
Yeah,
too.
and I was just so thankful that I had the opportunity. I'm still so thankful I had the opportunity. It was, I keep saying blessing, but it genuinely was.
Yeah, so like that passion is like your driving force towards everything that you do in acting, whereas some maybe actors it's money, or some actors it's developing your own craft for yourself.
Exactly. That's
cool.
So I would say, like, going forward, after you, let's say just post graduation, like, I know you're more of speech pathology. Like, where do you see yourself? Like, busy with what? Because you said you're full of energy, so it's like, where are you gonna put that energy towards?
I actually just was talking yesterday about this. I'm panicking because I thought that I would do. Okay, at the beginning of this year, I thought when I got cast as Alice, I thought from that point on, like, Alice by Heart would be the start of the end. Like, I would do a show my fall semester of senior year, and then in the spring, whether I get cast or not, if I get the chance to work behind the scenes or do anything involved with Legally Blonde, that would be like the fun closer, big bang, ended off there. But right when Alice by Heart ended, and I was just my schedule filled up with major related classes and I'm applying to graduate school, I realized that I just need an artistic outlet. And that's why I'm very thankful for our acapella group Shades of Blue. Yes. But even that, I just, there's something about musical theater that I think just because I've been doing it for so long and it fulfills me so much that not doing it, just, it feels so not me, and I feel like I'm missing something so important. So it's really important to me, and I'm hoping very much so that when I go to graduate school, I get the chance to be a part of a theater organization as well and continue to do that. If not, I'm going to try to find space outside of that. But I remember I literally talking yesterday, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, because when I'm working a job, I want to, like, I never envisioned myself being like an adult in community theater. Not that like community theater is bad or anything like that, but I always.
So you wouldn't do that?
No, I probably would, but I just that's the thing. I thought that I would be done in college and maybe like integrate it into my career, or get to see my children go into it, and that would be fulfilling enough. And I've kind of realized that I feel like I need that kind of artistic outlet in some way, shape, or form, and being involved somehow. So I'm just really hoping that. I really kind of took a shot in the dark with Penn State. I didn't even know we had a thespian society before I came here, and I really got so lucky with this chapter, so I'm just really hoping that I get that again.
For sure.
Okay. Well, I don't know, do you?
Let me think. Oh, yeah. Well, we can definitely, if there's anything that you would say, to people like 6-year-old you, people in that position, like younger than you, what advice, would you give them if they're interested in, thespian club or something of that sort?
Totally. I would definitely say that if there's I think going back to something talked about previously, if there's ever something that takes one of your biggest admirations in life and one of your biggest outlets in life and makes it feel like a chore, don't put it in that space. Like, that space is not right for you. And this isn't to discourage, like, if you are someone that is okay with, like, you, like, this is your purpose in life. And I'm not saying that you can't, I went on the whole thing of, like, I was so driven to pursue musical theater and then realized I was very family oriented. It doesn't mean that, like, you can't have a family and do, like, that. Who am I to say that? You know what I mean? I just knew that, like, it wasn't made for me, especially with the whole eye-opening component of it. Just didn't feel like the same way it had always felt for me, and it felt like a chore, and it felt like a stressor. But I have friends that are currently pursuing it right now, and they just love it because they get to do it every single day. So I think passions take several different forms, and just because it's not your primary force of your career doesn't mean it can't be in your career. So like integrate like speech pathology and finding that voice rehabilitation and being able to, something I'm also really interested in is researching music therapy. It's been shown to be really effective for neurodevelopment and TBI recovery and motor or like facial development and things of that nature. Just there's always a way to integrate what you love into your daily life, and that doesn't make it any less important. It doesn't make it you any less successful, or you're letting yourself down, or you're not reaching your full potential. That's absolutely not the case. I think you always need to have something that feels like you're something. And if it ever doesn't feel that way, I think it needs to take a different form.
I agree.
Oh, I love that.
That was really nice, yeah.
That was the perfect way to end it. I think.
Yeah, is there anything else you want to?
No, I think that's it. I
I
love
think-
that
I think
advice
we're good.
about, like, to the actresses and actors who are doing it, and because, like, the competition is so high, realistically what you just said was, you can, if you don't make it, like, you don't make it big,
Yeah.
maybe if that's what you love to do, don't just focus on that. Focus on incorporating in your life in a different way.
Yeah,
I
because
love
that is the harsh reality is like
yeah, statistically, like,
you're you're probably not gonna make it, but if you don't,
And I have a friend that went to Elon for musical theater, or
Yeah.
I knew her growing up. I always looked up to her. I did theater with her when I was young, and she's made it. She's gotten it in New York, and she's gotten castings, but she loves it. But she is constantly, like, she's in a show and she's auditioning for more shows because she needs to. It's not consistent. She needs to have things lined up constantly, and she loves it. But for me, like, I always just saw the beauty of being a musical theater person, like a performer, and just the fact that that it's not always like that behind the scenes, and you don't want to limit the beauty that it brings you. But that doesn't mean that you can't have it in your life, for sure.
And like all the time we see the stories of these famous actors and actresses that they're about to quit whatever acting. I just read John Krasinski's about how he like was so close to quitting, and he did one more audition, and it was The Office, and then look at him now.
look at him now.
Look at him now.
The sexiest man of the
Look
year.
at him
So
now.
I'd say he made it pretty big.
And on that note,
Yeah. Not on that note. On the note, thank you so much for coming,
Thank you
Perry.
so much
You were
for
great.
having me. This
Yeah.
was so much fun.
everything
Yeah.
was so good.
Appreciate you a lot. So.
Yay, thanks.
And that's Frame by Frame Podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.